All right. Hi, everyone. Next up, we are exploring positive behavioral intervention and supports, or PBIS. This is an essential framework for understanding and supporting student behavior at the school and classroom level. So PBIS is actually part of the MTSS multi-tiered systems of support. And if you recall, MTSS is not a specific program or curriculum, it's actually a framework. And this framework is designed to help schools integrate supports across four main areas, but maybe more: academics, behavioral, social emotional learning, and mental health. This umbrella graphic here will help us represent or visualize the components that make up the MTSS framework. So at the top here, we have MTSS. It's on multi-tiered systems of support. And that's the umbrella itself. That's the whole model we're working with. But underneath it, this is how we get all the MTSS pieces done. The first thing we have here is RTI and SST. So first, RTI, it stands for Response to Intervention. And SST stands for Student Support Teams. And if you thought I was kidding about how much special ed loves acronyms, I wasn't. We do. These two, RTI and SSTs, they are collaborative teams that schools use to monitor students who might be struggling and need more individualized supports. So both of these, response intervention, student support teams, they focus on more of the academic side of things. Now, not solely and not always is it only focused on our academics, but for, looking at the umbrella this way, RTI and SST, they are the academic wing, essentially. Now, we'll also see here SEL and mental health. So SEL stands for social emotional learning, and mental health supports is included on this side as well. These areas are getting more and more attention in schools, and rightfully so. There's a lot changing that needs to be addressed from student social emotional and mental health perspective. Supporting student behavior without addressing social emotional skills or mental wellness isn't really sustainable. We can't really separate them while talking about behavior. And now we get to PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. PBIS is the behavioral wing of our MTSS model here. It's where we apply the same logic of tiers and database decision making, but our focus is on teaching and supporting positive behavior. So we are on the behavior side of things. The key point here is that both MTSS and PBIS are built on a preventative model. We're not waiting for students to fall. We're not waiting for students to fail. We are offering help, but we're being proactive before anybody fails or falls or is like in crisis. We are trying our best to be proactive and put supports in place ahead of time. So this might look like teaching expected behaviors, reinforcing them consistently, big important word, and using simple interventions to catch issues early. Those would be maybe our tier ones and moving up to our tier twos. So the reason that this is important is because every educator, every person in that school building who's an adult responsible for any level of children seeing, viewing, supporting, they have a role to play in behavior supports. This isn't just the job of the special ed team. This isn't just the job of the people who are on that SST student support team. This isn't only the school admin, only the behavior specialist. This is everybody has a role to play if we're trying to make MTSS or PBIS both happen. So let's talk about PBIS a little bit more and more specifically. Like MTSS, PBIS is a tiered system. So we're going to see that same triangle graphic here. Tier 1 supports at the bottom are supports for all students. Every single student can access these. Tier 2 supports in the middle are going to be for students who require more support or more help to succeed behaviorally. And our tier 3 supports, these are supports reserved for students who require intensive intervention and have intensive needs. So what sets PBIS apart is the way that we think about behavior. PBIS does not focus on punishing behavior. It focuses on teaching. The goal is to build positive, predictable, and equitable environments, places where expectations are clear, feedback is consistent, and students know that they belong. When PBIS is done well, it creates safe learning environments where students can thrive, can succeed, and not just academically, but emotionally and socially too. So again, instead of catching kids doing the wrong thing and punishing them, we're going to shift to catching them doing the right thing and reinforcing that instead. That's really where PBIS is, I think, very successful in this shift of teach instead of punish. And this all, again, sounds really nice and simple, but really nice and simple also means a lot of work, a lot of intention, a lot of consistency, and a ton of buy-in from everyone in that school. So here we have a visual. It's a really common way that schools will make PBIS visible and actionable for students. This one here is specific to an elementary school, and what we're looking at is called a PBIS matrix. And this matrix breaks down expectations across different school settings. So we'll see the settings here, and we'll see the expectations across the top. Well, the schools usually call them values, like what are our main values or school-wide values. And for many schools, you'll see these same ones repeated: be respectful, be responsible, be safe. And that sounds great. Those three are wonderful. We want students to be respectful, responsible, and safe. But what does that all mean? And what does it mean when you're in the hallway versus what does it mean when you're in recess versus what does it mean when you go to the bathroom? This is what the matrix does. Now, when this school was planning to implement a PBIS model, the school team had to sit down and agree that these are going to be their core values, their core expectations. And once those were decided on, everyone working within that school system needs to be aware of the expectations, and not just aware, they need to be prepared to enforce them, to reinforce them within the students. This is especially important since this is the messaging that is shown to students, right? If we don't all follow this and hold ourselves and our students accountable to the expectations, then we just wasted time printing a poster and going to a PD, a professional development session about it. In this matrix here, the core intentions are broad, but they're positively stated in a way that suits the elementary school setting. We might see this look different. The older a student gets, there might not be as many visual graphics here. We might see wording change to be appropriate for the population. The level of clarity that is used or found within these matrices, that's what PBIS is aiming for. It's meant to help, or at least the messaging is meant to help students understand what's expected of them, not just in general terms, be respectful, right? But in very concrete, observable actions. Be respectful in the hallway means voices turned on, silent hellos, honor bubble space. A copy of this will be on our Canvas because I know it's quite small here. So I'll put a copy up for you all. And just to be clear, again, I'm going to say this the whole thing a bunch of times. This is not meant to be treated as just a classroom poster or decoration for your hallways. These expectations are you are supposed to teach them. We're supposed to model them. We're supposed to practice them and reinforce them throughout the entire school year, beginning, middle, and end. The reinforcement of them never ends, essentially. When implemented with fidelity, schools can use this matrix and all the other plans that they have within their PBIS system as a foundation for everything from behavior lessons to positive reinforcement systems. It also gives staff a common language and constant reference point. So students should be hearing and are hearing the same messages across classrooms, across environments, and from different adults and authority figures. So I'm going to share two examples where I have personally seen the difference in a well-implemented PBIS and a not well implemented PBIS. The first was from a school I visited. So I didn't work at the school, but I was doing observations of another teacher and I was visiting. And I had heard that the school had a really good PBIS system, but at that point, I can't tell you I knew all that much about it. So I go there, and from the moment you walk in the door, you could feel the consistency. This school has PBIS running through its DNA. Kids knew what to do in the hallways. Teachers were using the same prompts, the same language. I even in the classroom that I was visiting, I witnessed behavior lessons being built into the day, like they were reviewing the rules for going in the stairway while they're lining up. And it's when I went there was the end of the school year, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm looking at a fifth grade classroom. How often do we need to talk to them about going up the stairway? Don't we do this 3 times a week? It's from what I can understand here. And yeah, they do, but they never stop bringing it up because the staff and the teachers and whoever else are constantly reinforcing that expectations, to the point where students should be able to recite, if not summarize, what the values mean and how they're expected to uphold them. That is PBIS working. That's getting everybody in that boat. Now, in contrast to this, I worked in a high school that had messaging everywhere. It had the posters, and the teachers were given a training at the beginning of the year, maybe more. Honestly, I don't remember if we had more than one training, but whatever it was, I can tell you it wasn't enough because people never bought in. They never learned how to participate in the PBIS system, not just participate, how to be a member of, an active member of, a leader in the PBIS system. None of the teachers were doing that. We weren't using the same language. Honestly, outside of my door, we would hear a lot of like bigger, crazy things happening related to discipline. And in the time, this is like my first year teaching, I remember saying, that's outside my door. I can't worry about that right now because I could only worry about what was happening inside my classroom doors. And that is also not how the PBIS system is supposed to work. Everyone, again, is supposed to have a hand, and everyone should be able to intervene and support, and not just like kind of close this door and say, I hope they're okay, because that's not actually responding to behavior. That's not supporting behavior. That's literally ignoring it. Don't do that. Students didn't know the system in the high school that I taught in. They didn't even know what the posters were really saying because nobody ever like pointed them out and said, here's what we're doing. Here are the posters. Here's what these mean. Here's how we're going to talk about it and do it and act on it. They were literally just hallway decorations. Nothing was being taught or reinforced the way that the school had envisioned it to be. And sure, there are many reasons for that, but I'm going to say maybe buy-in is one of the bigger reasons for it. You really, really, really have to get everyone on board before you go in and just start saying we're going to do things. So if you're thinking like, well, yeah, if everybody's on board, it looks great on paper. How can we really do this in real life? Like, how do we get everyone on board? And you're not alone in these thoughts, because these systems, this behavioral system, the MTSS systems, they take really intense planning. They take a lot of consistency, not just a lot, real consistency. And they take real collaboration in order to be effective. And to add to that, training. It doesn't matter that 10 of us in the school building know it. We got it. We understand how to do it. It matters that every single one of us in the school building know it. We got it. We know how to do it. Because when it's done well, it can dramatically shift a school culture around. PBIS is built on the belief that behavior is something we teach, not just something we expect students to know. Something I'm hearing a lot from teachers these days are students are coming to school and they have like no concept of how to behave in a school system. For whatever reasons that may be true, we're going to go with this idea of they don't know, we have to teach. And though it's different, like an example would be, we wouldn't punish a student for not knowing how to do math before they got into your school to learn math, right? We teach them to do it. The same principle applies, though in context much different. If we assume, however, that students are just expected, just know what's expected, that's also setting them up to fail. A student who constantly calls out might not be trying to be disrespectful. They may have also simply never been taught explicitly what appropriate class participation looks like. So that's why PBIS focuses on teaching behavior the way we teach academics, modeling expectations clearly, reinforcing students when they get it right, and providing plenty of clarity and practice and support along the way. The answer to this attention check is false. Students are not expected to already know what appropriate behavior looks like without being taught. We have to teach them how to do that. Within PBIS, there are 5 key elements that make it work. It's systems, data, practices, outcomes, and equity. We're going to briefly look over each one. First is systems. An effective PBIS doesn't just happen, again, by putting up posters. We know that alone doesn't work. And we know one big training doesn't work. PBIS starts with foundational systems that make the work sustainable, meaning we can keep it going, right? First, think about your school's leadership team. Is there someone focused on behavior, on student wellness? Does the team include voices from all major areas, general ed, SPED, related service providers? Diverse representation on leadership teams is key. It ensures that PBIS, the model that y'all are trying to make work, actually reflects the real needs of your campus. So, for example, a team made up of only special ed teachers is not actually going to be representative of school-wide behavior. Our focus is on something different or maybe something more specific than the whole school. But a team that includes voices from each department, each grade, each subject, well, that will help us get a better understanding of the school-wide needs. The PBIS systems also include regular training and coaching. Again, not a one-time PD, actual ongoing support that helps staff stay aligned and confident in using the model. The reason that this is so important is because it also means that whoever are leading the PBIS efforts in your school need to actually know it, understand it, and be able to teach it to you so that you can then continue implementing it. And they can help you fix and adjust within the system when needed, as needed. And that's especially important when you have a new person, a new teacher kind of joining in, a new student joining in. But it's also really important the first times we're trying to roll out this thing and work out kinks. We need somebody who can, not more than somebody, we need leaders within the system who can also continuously help provide that ongoing support. And finally, there need to be structures in place to keep the work going. So without this long-term vision, even the best initiatives can fizzle out. If you've ever seen a school roll out something new and then drop it a few months later, that's what PBIS systems are designed to avoid. So like MTSS, our big brother umbrella model, one of the cornerstones of PBIS is using data every day. And I'm going to give you a spoiler here. All of those models for MTSS, they all rely on data. Data is really important. The data can come from a variety of sources. We're looking at behavior incident reports, attendance patterns, simple tracking tools that teachers use themselves, frequency trackers, behavior checklists, like observational notes. The goal isn't to track behavior just for the sake of documentation. We're tracking behavior to see if there's something we need to do proactively, right? Instead of waiting until things escalate, PBIS teams will look at those data to see if there's any early indicators that a student or a group of students might need more support than what they're currently being given. So it also means a continuous review and analysis of the data you're collecting. And just as important as this, PBIS teams are meant to disaggregate or split up that data by very important key factors in your school's population. So looking at things by gender, by race, by primary language, by students' disability status, whatever other kind of big categorization there is, we would also want to look at the data split into those categories to see if maybe we are over or under addressing behaviors within some groups and not others. So if certain students are being referred more or excluded more frequently, that looking at the data is actually going to help us make the changes that are appropriate. Next is practices, and we're going to look at what practices might actually fall under PBIS. Some of them are probably things you already know: setting expectations, we're modeling routines, we're using praise intentionally, and following through on consequences with consistency. Those are all things we generally know are meant to be happening in classrooms or in schools in general. The key difference is that in PBIS, these practices are selected intentionally and also grounded in evidence. That means we're not relying on well, that's how I've always done it, and that's how I'm going to keep doing it model or way of thinking. Instead, we are going to focus on what research and updated practices show actually support behavior and learning. And we're going to implement those. And that it doesn't mean we have to do it exactly the exact way that it was described in this research article, but we're putting in those elements of the newer updated research to make sure to ensure that we are using evidence-based practices with our students, things that we know should work and that we can also track in that manner. Some examples of this might include teaching expectations explicitly and like through your own kind of curriculum development, providing behavior-specific praise, offering visual supports and prompts, and building in more frequent opportunities for feedback and redirection. When we talk about the outcomes in PBIS, it's not just about reducing bad behaviors, right? That's part of it, but the bigger goal is growth in student behavior, growth in social emotional learning. Yes, growth in academic performance. Growth is the goal. Each school or district sets their own measurable goals. An example might be like increasing student time spent in class, engaged and learning, or improving results on school climate surveys, or reducing the use of discipline and suspension and office referrals. Those are all goals, right? Outcomes, or what those outcomes should be, aren't just chosen by admin behind closed doors. They are meant to be defined with community input, community being from the family, from educators, from students if possible, and from school staff. PBIS works best when the goals we have reflect the values and the priorities of the whole school's community. Equity is at the heart of PBIS. The traditional discipline systems have too often harmed the very students who need support the most: students of color, English learners, students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, many different other groupings of students, socioeconomically disadvantaged also being a really big one there. PBIS challenges us to disrupt those patterns. That means digging into our data to look for disparities. And it means reflecting on our own practices and asking, who is this system, this PBIS system really serving? Is it serving everybody, or is it really focusing on some students more than others? And most importantly, it means designing systems that support all students, especially those who have historically been underserved, so that we can fix those gaps in education and in equity. We can do that a little bit better when we're being more intentional about it. And that could look like co-creating behavior expectations that reflect more of your understanding of students' cultures and their experiences, ensuring communication with families that happens in the language that they use at home, building classroom where every student sees themselves represented. Those are all really important. Equity here isn't just about giving students access, it's about creating spaces where they are seen and valued and supported to be successful. So I'm not sure if I'm making PBIS sound like wishy-washy because this is your big overview of it, but the systems do work. The asterisk to this is they only work when implemented with fidelity. That means they work when they are done right. And that means that everyone, again, is using those same expectations. We are teaching them constantly and we are reinforcing them just as regularly. And that's where things tend to fall apart. Inconsistency and follow through, unclear buy-in, systems that are just not well maintained, like people don't really have a great way of getting things done. And you might walk into a classroom where PBIS is thriving and then another where nothing is happening at all. A totally different system is going on. And that kind of inconsistency, the students know it. They pick on it fast, and they'll know that they can behave differently depending on who they're with. And those behaviors might be minor, but they also might be significant. And when we don't have a consistent way to reinforce them because we're doing totally different things, then we're also messaging very different things to students on how they could or should behave. So PBIS does not mean ignoring problem behaviors. It doesn't mean handing out prizes constantly. And it's not just for little kids. It's about creating a school culture where behavior is taught and reinforced, not just managed with punishment. It's a shift in mindset. Instead of focusing only on what not to do, we help students understand what to do, and then we reinforce it. We notice when they do it and we call it out correctly. Great job. I see that you did that. Good job. Like, you are praising the efforts towards doing the behavior correctly. And again, PBIS is not solely for posters in the hallway or to talk about during school assemblies. It lives in and out of the classroom. In all parts of that school building it lives, but also in all parts of your classroom, PBIS is supposed to also be living. It means that you as the teacher of that classroom need to take time to define clear behavior expectations for things like transitions, for group work, for independent work. You build on that same system that the school's model is built on. PBIS systems often fall apart when staff aren't trained, expectations aren't revisited, and reinforcement stops. You might see inconsistency from class to class, or students trying to test the system because they're confused about what's expected or no longer feel seen for doing the right thing. If everyone isn't just as invested And let's say Mr. Parker down the hall is just going to go do his own thing from now on. It begins to undermine the work done by everyone else because Mr. Parker went and did his own system. He's always been using this system and it's working fine, right? Like he doesn't have behavioral issues going on. And so next door, Mrs. James is like, well, I'm going to go back to my old system, except Mrs. James' old system wasn't really that great. But she's going back to it because it's easier and that's what she's known. And it did kind of work for a while. But now behaviors start to break down, our systems start to break down, and we have to probably start from the beginning in this whole area here.
And that's not what we want.
We're going to do a final pause and reflect.